Hi, everyone. So it will just be me today, Monica Lira Bravo. As Giovanni said, thank you, Giovanni. I am the owner of Lira Bravo Law, which is a law firm that specializes in immigration. And so today I'm going to talk to you about DACA, what is known as a deferred action for childhood arrivals. Most people call DACA. And it is a program that started in 2012, 9 years ago. And so I'm just going to, before I go into the requirements for DACA, I want to talk about what DACA is and what it's not. Okay. And feel free to send me questions. If you have any questions over DACA, I'm happy to answer that. So what DACA is, it's a 2-year work permit that will allow the person who has the DACA status to qualify for authorization for work for 2 years. It will allow the person to get a social security number if they do not have one, and it will allow the person to get a Texas ID or driver's license. Okay. It is also protection from deportation. So DACA is really great, but what it is not legal permanent resident status. So it does not give you the full benefits of being able to enter the country and leave the country. You don't have any pathway to citizenship with DACA. Okay. So unfortunately, I want to make that clear because sometimes people think, oh, if I have DACA, then I directly qualify for citizenship. And unfortunately, right now, not. Okay. And I'm happy to answer questions too if anybody has any questions in Spanish. So let's go to the requirements. Okay, and so the requirements for DACA, there is basically an age minimum and max to qualify for DACA. So to the max age, the oldest person that could qualify for DACA had to have been under the age of 31 when DACA was announced by President Obama on June 15th of 2012. So what does that mean? So that means that right now, the person would be about 40. That would be the oldest person that could qualify for DACA, okay? And the minimum age is 15. You have to be at least 15 years old to qualify for DACA. And you have to show that you entered the country before you were 16 years old, and that you've been living in the country continuously since June 15th of 2007. And so you have to show basically evidence that you lived in the country from 2007 until now. And you have to also show that you didn't have legal status as of June 15th, 2012. Why June 15th, 2012? Because that's the day when President Obama announced DACA. And so, for example, if you were here on some type of visa on June 15th, 2012, and then your visa didn't expire until 2015, you would not qualify for DACA because you were in lawful status on June 15th of 2012. And then the other requirement is that you either currently be in school, or that you have graduated from high school with a diploma, or that you've obtained a GED, or you've been honorably discharged as a veteran from any of the armed forces. Now, the other thing that we've been able to help a lot of people get DACA was if they maybe didn't graduate from high school and they didn't have the GED, but they were currently enrolled in a class to get a GED. That will be sufficient to qualify for DACA, okay? And then also you cannot have been convicted of a felony, what we call a significant misdemeanor, or 3 or more just regular misdemeanors. And so a significant misdemeanor, I'll just give you an example of one, because there's a list of misdemeanors that will disqualify you from DACA. Driving while intoxicated, DWI, is one of those misdemeanors that unfortunately will disqualify you from DACA. Okay. And so, somebody has asked a question, why is DACA important? Why are we talking about this today? So DACA is important because we have over 1 million people in the United States who were brought to the United States when they were underage by their parents as minors. And many of these are DISD students who have basically grown up thinking they were U.S. citizens and, getting all the benefits of, a good education and even going to college. And unfortunately, without DACA, those students won't be able to use their degrees to get a job because unfortunately they don't have work authorization. And so that was the idea behind President Obama initiating DACA in 2012, was to give some type of protection from deportation and also the ability to work to these students. Okay. And so that's why, it's important. I can tell you that right now, DACA is subject to several lawsuits in the court. And so unfortunately, they are not processing new applications. So what does that mean? So if you have DACA and you just need to renew it, you're fine. You can keep renewing your DACA every 2 years. Get a new. Unfortunately, this hurts our students who are maybe barely turning 15 or 16 years old, and so are barely eligible to apply for DACA. Unfortunately, right now, they can mail the application into USCIS, which is the immigration office, and they'll accept it, but they're not going to process it, which means the application is basically going to sit there until a judge rules or that they can be processed, or until President Biden issues a new order saying that they can process new applications. And what I can tell you is that recently President Biden asked for comments on DACA. On basically, he's gonna issue what we call DACA 2.0. He's gonna issue a new version of it, and we're hoping it'll be a little bit better than current DACA. So maybe instead of a 2-year work permit, it'll be a 3-year work permit. And maybe they'll change these requirements that we have before you, right? So instead of having to show that you've been here since 2007, we hope that they'll change that year to maybe 2010 or even 2018, 2019, something more recent, because we do know that we have about 1 million people who qualify under these specific requirements. But if you take away the time requirement, like if we change it to an earlier date or to a more recent date, then there will be a lot more students who could qualify for DACA status. Okay. And so somebody asked a question about what are examples of felonies that could prevent children from being DACA eligible. Okay, so unfortunately, the way that the law is written, any felony will disqualify you from DACA. Okay, and so let's talk about what's a felony. So in criminal cases, we basically have 2 types of cases. So we have felonies and we have misdemeanors. Felonies are going to be any crime where you can be sentenced to more than a year in jail. So they're going to be like your more serious things, obviously, big things like murder, maybe possession of drugs, burglaries. Those things that could disqualify that would be a felony. Misdemeanor, they're going to be more simple. It's like I've had clients. Students who've had maybe like a theft charge because maybe they were shoplifting. If it's theft under a small amount, like $50, it's a big deal. But there are, like I said, very specific misdemeanors that can disqualify you. So let's talk about assault, right? So assault is like fighting, which sometimes unfortunately students get into fights. So a regular assault, like maybe like with a classmate, is not going to be a big deal. But an assault like a family member, that will be a big deal because that's what's considered family violence or domestic violence. And so more if you do have something like that, that could potentially disqualify you from DACA. Okay. Another question is if we know if DACA students are eligible to apply for FAFSA. So unfortunately, they are not. If you saw the presentation earlier when they went a little bit into what we call TAFSA, which is Texas, which is the Texas application. So FAFSA is a federal application. TAFSA is the state application, the Texas form. And so DACA students are eligible for TAFSA. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think the next presenter from Dallas College will talk about, which is that many colleges have money set aside where it doesn't require legal status. So it doesn't matter if you're not a citizen or a resident or you have DACA. There's money out there that people with DACA status can qualify for. Dallas College is a great example of a place where students can go to get their full higher education paid for, even with DACA status. In fact, we have a high number of DACA students in Dallas College who are able to, complete their degrees without having to pay anything because of the help that the college offers to them. Okay, and can we go to the next slide? Okay, so here's just some very basic information about DACA. The fee for DACA is $4.95. That's how much immigration charges someone to renew their DACA. So every time that we have a DACA student who needs to apply to renew their work permit, which I typically recommend to my clients to renew their work permit about 5 months in advance, 150 days, they have to pay $4.95. The great thing is that there are nonprofits out there that do help with that fee if someone is unable to pay it. So if your child has DACA and you don't have the money to pay for it, there's definitely resources out there. I would definitely start with United We Dream, and that's a national organization that is specifically made for dreamers. So dreamers is another word for people with DACA status, and they do a lot of work with different communities all over the country to help students defray that. Locally in Dallas, there's North Texas Dream Team, which is an affiliate of United We Dream, and I've helped them on several occasions put on different workshops so that people are able to renew their DACA permit without having to hire an attorney or someone to do it for them. And sometimes they are able to award scholarships for that $4.95. So look them up too on social media. They normally will post when they have their workshops, and they typically either like to do it at a DISD school or a Dallas College campus. Okay. And so briefly, the forms that are required for DACA are on here. It's the I-821D, the I-765WS, and the I-765. So that's basically the work permit application. Okay. And like I said before, the validity of the work permit is 2 years. Now, Form I-131, I'm going to talk about on the next slide. We can go to the next slide. Okay. And so Form I-31 is what's called parole. So advanced parole is basically a permit to for people with DACA to be able to travel out the states. So like I said, DACA is not the same as legal permanent resident status. You have to request permission first before you can leave the United States, and you have to get that permission approved for you to be able to travel outside of the United States. And on here are the grounds for which one can qualify for advanced parole. So it can be for humanitarian purposes, for educational purposes, or for employment purposes. Okay, and so those are the reasons why one can qualify for advanced parole. And on here too is the filing fee for advanced parole, which is going to be $575. Any other questions about DACA? Okay. So if a DACA recipient commits a crime, can his or her DACA be revoked? So yes, if a DACA recipient commits a crime, it can be revoked, but like I said, it has to fall within one of those grounds, right? So if it's something simple like theft, right? It's not going to disqualify them. If it's something obviously like assault, family violence, DWI, yes, it will. Sometimes, I like if my clients get in trouble, and a lot of times, with young students, it can be drugs. So depending on the drug, it may or may not disqualify them. So maybe if it's like a possession of marijuana, if it's a small amount, more than likely they will not be disqualified. Okay. All right. And can DACA students apply for financial aid in the FAFSA application in the state of Texas? They are not eligible to complete the FAFSA application due to, yes. So, okay, yes. So Jonna was just answering the question from earlier that DACA students can apply for financial aid by completing the FAFSA. And so I always encourage any of my DACA clients to continue to pursue their education because, like I said, there's so much help here in the state of Texas for DACA students to continue their education, get a higher education degree, and go to grad school. I mean, I've had several clients who've become teachers, architects, lawyers, so the sky is really the limit. Okay, so we have one question in Spanish. Si mi hijo entró en el 2013, entraría en el programa de DACA. Entonces, desafortunadamente, no va a calificar porque ahorita para calificar para DACA se tiene que mostrar que entró antes del año 2007, junio 15 del 2007. Ahorita desafortunadamente no, pero estamos esperando que el presidente Biden cambie los requisitos y que tal vez sea una fecha más cercana. Okay, and then how many years do they look at your background? And so for DACA, unfortunately, they're going to look at all your time here in the United States. And like I said, you have to show that you've been living here from 2007 until now. Typically, when you apply, after you apply for DACA, you will get scheduled to get fingerprinted. We call it biometrics appointment. And that's basically how they check the fingerprints in a national database to see if you have any criminal history. Obviously, you can have some things. I've had some clients who maybe they got in trouble for fighting at school and they got what we call a citation, right? So maybe it's just like what's called a Class C misdemeanor. That's not a big deal. That you can still qualify. It just depends on what are your arrests for, what are the convictions. And so, I mean, it's not impossible. You just have to basically disclose it. You have to list it on the application. Okay, any other questions on DACA? If not, what I can say also about advanced parole, because on the very bottom, one of the questions is, what are the benefits of advanced parole beyond just travel? So my clients typically who do advanced parole do it for one of two reasons. One, it may be just, because they have a family member that they haven't seen in a long time, like a grandparent who's maybe sick. Maybe it's because their parents got deported and they haven't seen them in a while and they want to go visit them. Or maybe, they want to do a study abroad program. But the other reason to do it is if you entered into the country illegally. If you entered into the country illegally and then you want to apply for green card through marriage, you typically have to leave the country to get residency. But if you do advanced parole, you are able to bypass leaving the country to get your residency, and you would then be allowed to apply for your resident status in the United States, and it's a lot faster process. So that would be one of the other reasons why I recommend to my clients to consider advanced parole beyond just wanting to travel, which obviously travel is great, and you will have the ability to do that. Okay, well, if we have no other questions, I would just like to say thank you for the invitation, and here's my information for my law firm if y'all have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You cover all the other questions. Thank you.